like that. So seriously, I take the legacy of Jews who fought Nazis. He was not a Zionist. He didn't believe in a sovereign Jewish state. Even Albert Einstein, who they asked to be the president of Israel, wanted it to be safe for Jewish life in present Israel and Palestine, but he worried that Jewish sovereignty would have dangerous consequences. So there are anti-Zionists who are members of my synagogue, who I can tell you are absolutely not anti-Semitic, who care about the safety of Jews, who don't believe that the state is making Jews safer. That's not my position.
There are anti-Zionists who are members of my synagogue who care deeply about the safety of Jews. That is not my position, but I do not think it is anti-Semitic. Those were the words of New York City Comptroller Brad Lander, a prominent Jewish progressive Democrat, live on mainstream television. When the host tried to deploy the standard cable news playbook, quoting U.S. Special Envoy Deborah Lipstadt to claim that anti-Zionism is inherently anti-Semitism, she expected a defensive backtrack. Instead, Lander dismantled the claim using real Jewish history, invoking figures from Albert Einstein to the leaders of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. This was a masterclass in separating legitimate political critique from weaponized smears, and it exposed just how shallow mainstream political discourse has become on this issue. I'm Neil. This is the honest perspective. Truth over access, people over profits. Let's get into it.
Lipstadt, who is a world-renowned scholar on these issues, I asked her, she said, I do believe that anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism. However, I also believe that anti-Zionism has morphed into its own kind of demonization and hatred, a prejudice all its own.
So I disagree with that also. I mean, Zionist can be used as a slur, and believe me, if you look in my mentions, I hear it that way. But you know, my son, is named after this guy, Marek Edelman, who was a Bundist, a Jewish democratic socialist in the Warsaw Ghetto, who helped lead the Warsaw Ghetto uprising like that. So seriously, I take the legacy of Jews who fought Nazis. He was not a Zionist. He didn't believe in a sovereign Jewish state. Even Albert Einstein, who they asked to be the president of Israel, wanted it to be safe for Jewish life in present Israel and Palestine, but he worried that Jewish sovereignty would have dangerous consequences. So there are anti-Zionists who are members of my synagogue, who I can tell you are absolutely not anti-Semitic, who care about the safety of Jews, who don't believe that the state is making Jews safer. That's not my position, but I don't think it's anti-Semitic.
Notice what happened in that exchange. When cable news hosts try to define the boundaries of acceptable debate, they almost always rely on the premise that anti-Zionism is a modern, external hostility invented to target Jewish people. Brad Lander didn't just object to that premise. He reclaimed Jewish history to prove it false. He reminded the audience that non-Zionism and anti-Zionism were not imported from the outside. They were vibrant, mainstream movements within European Jewish political thought long before 1948. Let's look at how he takes that historical foundation and applies it directly to the 2028 presidential race and the legal definition of genocide.
Let's look ahead to 2028. What do you expect and want from a Democratic candidate for president?
First and foremost, a vision of an economy that works for working people, a vision for healthcare and housing and childcare that people can afford. Folks are desperate. They feel the system is rigged against them. Now they see like AI data centers poisoning their water and taking their jobs. A vision that works for working people. A vision for political reform. We're going to have to do something about the Supreme Court, about gerrymandering, about money in politics. And also a hopeful energy, I have to tell you, like what's been moving in New York since the Knicks won and we have the World Cup. There's a hopeful energy that Mayor Mamdani's been able to tap into. I wanted something like that for our country as a whole.
Going back to our discussion before, there are, I think, at least a trio, maybe more, of potential candidates in 2028 who are Jewish. You have Josh Shapiro, governor of Pennsylvania, J.B. Pritzker, Illinois, Senator Ossoff, senator from Georgia, and Rahm Emanuel. They're all critical of Prime Minister Netanyahu, but they all believe in Israel's right to exist and have stopped short of calling what's happening in Gaza genocide. Do you think that somebody with those views and that religion could be the nominee for president in the Democratic Party?
I do. I think it's going to require clarity that we need a reset in the U.S. relationship with Israel. I think saying we're not going to continue to provide the 2,000-pound bombs that destroyed Gaza, that we're going to insist on human rights and international law compliance, and we're going to stop aid until that happens, and that Israel has to step up to recognizing that what's necessary is self-determination for Palestinians and Israelis, a horizon of political mutual recognition and peace. Look, and I'm happy to explain to any of them why I think Raphael Lemkin, the Polish Jew and Holocaust survivor who developed the term genocide, the Lemkin Institute considers what's happening there a genocide, like Omer Bartov, an amazing Israeli Holocaust
scholar. So is that a
scholar.
litmus test?
I don't think it's a litmus test. I think it's something useful for people to look at and grapple and reckon with. We've spent thousands of years as the victims, as a rough grappling with what it means in some ways to be a perpetrator. I think it's a useful dialogue for American Jews to have, but I don't think it's a litmus test in the presidential race. I do think a reset in the U.S.-Israel relationship is.
What makes this interview so remarkable isn't just that Brad Lander stood his ground. It's that every single historical receipt he cited on air stands up to rigorous fact-checking, completely undermining the host's attempt to conflate anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism. Lander mentioned that his son is named after Marek Edelman. Edelman wasn't just any figure in Jewish history. When primary commander Mordechai Anielewicz died during the 1943 Warsaw Ghetto Uprising against the Nazis, Edelman took over as the operational leader of the Jewish Fighting Organization. Edelman was a lifelong member of the General Jewish Labor Bund, a secular Jewish socialist party in Eastern Europe that explicitly rejected Zionism in favor of Deutschheit, a Yiddish concept meaning here-ness, the belief that Jews should fight for rights, equality, and anti-fascism wherever they lived, rather than seeking a separate nation-state. After World War II, Edelman chose to stay in Poland, worked as a world-renowned cardiologist, joined the anti-communist solidarity movement, and remained an outspoken anti-Zionist until his death in 2009. For decades, official Israeli institutions largely minimized his legacy, specifically because he refused to endorse state Zionism. To claim that anti-Zionism is inherently anti-Semitic requires erasing the very commander who led the armed Jewish resistance in the Warsaw. Ghetto.Lander pointed to Albert Einstein, who was famously offered the presidency of Israel in 1952 by Prime Minister David Ben-Gurion. Einstein declined, but his political writings on the subject revealed deep skepticism toward ethno-national statehood. In a 1938 speech, Einstein stated that he would much rather see a reasonable agreement reached with Arabs on the basis of living together in peace than the creation of a Jewish state, noting that his awareness of the essential nature of Judaism resisted the idea of a Jewish state with borders, an army, and temporal power. Furthermore, in December 1948, Einstein, alongside political philosopher Hannah Arendt and other prominent Jewish intellectuals, published a famous letter in the New York Times warning the American public against Menachem Begin's Herut Party, the direct predecessor of today's ruling Likud Party, describing its ideology as terrorist and fascist-leaning. Finally, when addressing the 2028 presidential race and candidates like Josh Shapiro or J.B. Pritzker who refused to use the word genocide, Lander cited Raphael Lemkin. Lemkin was a Polish Jewish lawyer who lost 49 family members in the Holocaust. He personally coined the term genocide in 1944 and single-handedly lobbied the United Nations to draft the 1948 Genocide Convention. Today, the Lemkin Institute for Genocide Prevention, an independent organization named in his honor, has issued multiple formal warnings and declarations stating that Israel's actions in Gaza, including mass starvation, targeting of health infrastructure, and military bombardment, meet the legal threshold of genocide under international law. When mainstream news anchors cite figures like Special Envoy Deborah Lipstadt to declare that anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism, they aren't engaging in historical analysis. They are enforcing political orthodoxy. They attempt to flatten thousands of years of Jewish ethical debate into a single loyalty test for the Israeli military apparatus. Brad Lander demonstrated how progressives ought to respond, not by apologizing or shifting the goalposts, but by using real, unassailable historical facts to hold both the media and political leaders accountable. If you believe in real history over political talking points and truth over corporate media narratives, hit that subscribe button. I'm Neil. That's the honest perspective, and that's where I'll leave you.